Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, Cedric.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the second webinar organized by jointly by all the Govs, so ITUC, IUF, Industrial, Uni, IUF, PSI, and also with Education International. We'll be starting very soon. The moderator is a bit late now because of traffic, but he will be online with us very soon. So before the webinar starts, I'd like to remind a few rules on how the webinar will go. So first of all, for all people not speaking English, you can see you have interpretation in Spanish, French, Japanese, Russian, Portuguese, and Arabic. So you can select your channel by clicking on the button interpretation at the bottom of your screen and choose the right channel. So for Arabic, there is no dedicated channel in Zoom, so you need to use the Chinese channel. Is the interpretation good in all languages? Are all the channels running? Unless anybody says so, I think it will be okay. During the webinar, there will be sessions of questions and answers between the panel and all the participants. So we'll invite you to write your questions down the chat, and they will be sent to the moderator, and hopefully we'll have enough time to answer most of them. And we count on your participation. We want this discussion to be interactive, to be able to take about all the topics that you would like to be treated. So please do not hesitate to ask questions and to participate, to send comments in the chat for all to exchange. Apart from this, so the webinar will last 1 hour and a half. If so, it should finish at 3:30 European time, Central European time, and of course we will continue to try to get more webinars coming in the future. So before Debbie comes online, I'd like to introduce also the other panelists who will take the floor today with us. So the first one is let me get the names right. Is Nice Coronation from from Central Philippines. The second one is oh, sorry. So the second one will be Dorothea Zek from Seafarers Union of Croatia, and the final one will be Ashna Sumungul from the Confédération des Travailleurs du Secteur Privé of Mauritius. I think is Debbie online now? It should be. I will check. So I will try to contact David to get him to join us for now. And thank you again for your patience. And I will do the maximum so that we can start the webinar quickly. Okay, so the moderator is coming. We will start in less than 5 minutes. So also to precise a bit, so you can send your comments and chat with everyone in the chat button at the bottom of your screen. And if you have specific questions you want to raise for the panel or the moderator, you have a Q&A button just next to the chat. And this is where we will receive your questions and forward them to the moderation. We also have some people will be looking at the questions on the social network, on Facebook and everything. So also do not hesitate to raise questions there, and we will try also to send them to the moderator, like the question asked in the Zoom webinar. Okay. So thanks again for your patience, and we start in less than 5 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And welcome to the second webinar on young workers. The title of this webinar, as most of you know, it's New Normal, Amplifying Young Voices. My name is Maria Tsirantonaki, and I work for the International Trade Union Confederation based in Brussels. As we're waiting for our moderator to join the webinar, unfortunately, as my colleague from PSI, Cedric, has already mentioned, Davey, who is the moderator for this session, has had some technical issues. But hopefully he will be able to join very soon. But in the meantime, I'm taking the lead so that we are not taking so much of your own time, and we'll start the webinar. As already mentioned, this is the second webinar of a series of 2 webinars that we as global unions we are organizing and hoping with these webinars to indeed to provide a platform for young people, for young workers everywhere to share their concerns, and to share their own situation in their own countries and in their own regions of what is happening with the COVID-19 pandemic and how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected young people, both the ones who are still in education, the ones who are in employment, or the ones who are about to start working and start entering the labor market. So the first webinar that we did 2 weeks ago was really focusing on the specific impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on young workers and how trade unions in particular have tried to help tackle these impacts. So we had a number of panelists, around 6 panelists who shared from different regions who shared their experiences on how young people and how they specifically they have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, but also what their unions have been doing to try to address those impacts. Now, with this second webinar, what we are going to discuss with our 3 panelists is how we can ensure that we as young workers, and more specifically as young workers within trade unions, we can help shape a new normal that it will be different, that we are not going back to a new normal that it was before the pandemic, because as we all know, the situation even before the pandemic for young workers was not ideal. We know that young workers were very much represented in precarious jobs, in insecure jobs, short-term jobs, in so-called zero-hour contracts. We know that young people are that the levels of unemployment are very high for young people, and in some countries, young people have huge chances to be in unemployment compared to other groups of working people. And at the same time, we know that young people are highly represented in the informal economy. So with the speakers we're having in this webinar today, we're going to discuss how we are going to ensure that the new normal, it is based indeed and grounded in economic, social, racial, gender and climate justice, and that the new normal does take into consideration the needs and aspirations of young people. And so we want to ensure that young people are front and center of the new normal. So we will start first with our sister from the Philippines, Nais Coronacion. She is the Deputy General Secretary of Centro, one of the main national centers in the Philippines. So we'd like to welcome Nais, and if she can introduce herself. And then we do a quick round of introductions. First, we start with Nais, then we go with Asna, and then we continue with Dorotea. And then after this first round of introductions, then my colleague Davey Porras, who has just joined and who is going to be the moderator for this webinar, is going to take the floor from me. So thank you, everyone.
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, sisters and brothers from all over the world. I'm Nais Coronacion. As Maria have said, I'm the Deputy Secretary General of Centro. I am a former fast food worker, and I'm a young woman leader.
Hi, comrades. I am Ashna from CTSP of Mauritius. I am a member in the Youth Committee and organizing the trade union. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Dorotea. I'm coming from Seafarers Union of Croatia, but I also represent young transport workers in the ITF, International Transport Workers Federation. Thank you.
Over to you, Davey.
Hola, buenos días para todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. My first thing is to apologize for getting here so late. Something cropped up at the last minute, and it was very difficult for me to be here at 6 o'clock. I had to go out, I had to take my car, but I am very sorry. I would like to apologize. And I'm luckily, though, I was able to get here. I'd like to thank Nash Nice and everyone who's on the panel to allow me to expose our experiences with you. And I hope that what we have to share with you today will be useful for everyone who's connected and is listening in. Now, we're looking at the role of trade unions. What can we do, and what can we do? What actions can we take that will have political and social clout? Now, we all live in the same world. And we are going to look at a three-pronged approach to the work. And these are going to be of interest to all of us. And I think what we need to do is coordinate our approach, and we need to take a human rights approach to the work that we're doing. We need to begin saying that we will take time to find out what you've been doing. We would like to share your experience. That would be the first thing we need to do, to pool that experience. And looking at what your unions are doing and what's on your agenda at the moment, what specifically are you doing at the moment as we try and move back to some kind of normality? What actions are you taking? So I think we could start here with Nice. Perhaps Nice could tell us, what work have you been doing up until now? What is your union been doing? And what do you think we could now do as we're coming out of confinement? And also, I would like to look at this from the women's perspective as well. Nice. Could you do the honors? Could you come in now, please?
Thank you, Brother Davey. Again, good evening here from the Philippines to all of you. But before I answer that question, it would be good to share that I became active in the movement when I was 19. So it's been 30 years now. I remember back then that I tend to observe more rather than to talk. I only answer or speak whenever I was asked. So I'm not that I'm not the leader who tend to speak and speak and speak when I am starting. But I was able to gain confidence after a series of immersion from our members and from the series of education work and activities that we had. But I must say that one of my favorite training is the gender sensitivity training, because from there I was able to see my personal journey of a young woman who are not developed to have a better confidence than men. Since we are living in a patriarchal society that men is having more power than us. So I have that sense when I was growing, but everything changes when I attended that training, and then I see from our leadership, from what I observed, that they are giving spaces for women, but the fight of women within the labor movement is also a challenge. So culturally, there are challenges for the labor movement because our fight is not just economic and political, but it's also about attitude, about character, how men leaders should deal with women leaders or members. There are factories where the officials are led by men, even though the bigger part of the membership are women. Internally to the labor movement, I must say that those are the challenges from the past. And if I want to reimagine a new world and a better normal, I want to build society, not just me, but our union's dream is to develop and create a women's movement within a labor movement where women will not cry anymore if they want to insert their demands. So those for me are the practical side of things in relation to the things we need to address as a labor movement, calling for equality, because equality would mean for me is not just equitable distribution of wealth, but also equal power relationship between men and women. That is why for us as a young woman in Centro in particular, we believe that for one, sex work is not work at all. And from our gender sensitivity training that I've shared a while ago, I must say that one of the very moving part is when we were able to meet and encounter victims and survivors of prostitution. That's why I'm always saying when we have lobbied and bottled for the ratification of Convention 190, where the labor movement succeeded in getting it as an adopted international instrument, that if we are fighting for violence, we should also make sure and recognize that prostitution is a form of violence against women. But on our end, that's one of our very most critic. So if we are building a better normal, I want to see many countries ratifying Convention 190, not just because the government wants it, but it's it's the labor movement who sees the importance of it for our demand of visioning a society where there is equality. But the second thing is that as a young woman, and I've met many domestic workers, we are organizing domestic workers, not just here in the Philippines, but also outside the country, Filipino domestic workers worldwide who are suffering many problems and challenges because of the pandemic. We've seen that many of the domestic workers are women as well. And we've seen that there are less opportunities for a better public services and a better pay, if you want to call it pay, or better recognition for care work and care services. As we remember the last year, the ITUC, or the International Trade Union Confederation, during the Global Day of Action last October 7th, we are campaigning for a public investment for care services. And if we want to build a better normal, we are saying that the government or the economic recovery should focus on bailing out workers and not the corporation. We are seeing that in this pandemic all over the world, that capitalism is failing. And capitalism is on its end, but it can recreate if we will not get this opportunity to also put forward our alternatives, or alternatives vision and society. But I am imagining, like what I've reiterated earlier, that if you want to build a better normal, it is not just about the changes of economic relationships and economic powers, because workers should take over that power. We can always dream of a bigger society where we can take over the control of power relationships in the company. But then again, as a young woman, it's very important that we also give focus on how the changing of behaviors among power relationship between men and women is being realized, and that can happen if we push through education. And given this pandemic, it's a challenge for the movement on how to maximize the online platforms like what we are doing to make sure that we are developing leaders, because we are not just leaders of tomorrow but of the day. And while we are honing and developing our own leadership capacities, it's also the task of the young people to also generate more young leaders who can be also active in the movement. Because if the movement is losing its power, then our vision of having a just, equal, and equitable society will also having a hard time trying to find its way. So we should get our acts together, because our problem is systematic. It's not just fruits of the tree, but it is the roots of the tree that we are battling about, and it's a long fight. So we need to focus on campaigning and regaining more investment to public services, economic recovery for workers, giving a voice for women, and gaining our control in terms of our economy. And it means that changing the core of the game. It means that the workers should make this as an advantage on our end in organizing and educating more workers. Because if we are having a more organized group, then we have power, and building a better normal would mean getting that mission done to realize the vision.
Excelente, nice. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Nice. Thank you for that introduction. And I think you've given some very good input for the conversation that we'll have a bit later on. Now, I would ask all of you that if you've got any question that comes to you, that anything that you want to put, we can put it at the end of this first part. And now there you can use the chat that we've got in this system, so you can ask your questions, and we'll come to those questions at the end of the first segment of this session. Now, Dorothea, I'm very happy to see you. Perhaps you could tell us something about your organization within your trade union organization. I know you've been working a lot on youth work, and perhaps you could talk about something which seems to be not very common within the union movement, and that is where the unions are working on green jobs, on climate justice. Now, perhaps you could talk about that, because that's something that not many unions are getting involved in. Maybe you could share us your experience, because certainly it is very important that we work on green jobs and we work on climate issues. And how have you managed to achieve this? How have you, from the youth side, managed to create this kind of movement? How have you managed to create this buzz, as it were, with these subjects? Dorothea, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, David. And as you heard, my name is Dorotea. I am coming from Seafarers Union of Croatia, the union that represents thousands of seafarers sailing all over the world. My union is affiliated to International Transport Workers Federation, the ITF, that represents all transport workers around the world. And I am representative of young workers in the ITF as one of the co-chairs. In my union, as well as in the ITF, as young workers, we are included in work on two major challenges all workers are facing today. And as you said, I would like to share a bit about those two challenges we are facing. The first one is climate change, but the second one is, of course, COVID-19 and how we can connect both of those issues. We are all aware of crucial changes in the world's climate in recent decades. We can see all those changes all around us in the whole society. Extreme weather conditions, rainfalls, rising seas. It is clear that we are already late trying to prevent negative effects of the climate change. In the same time, we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. As the climate change, this pandemic is also a huge challenge that also affects the whole world and all societies. Now, this climate change, this COVID pandemic, as well as climate change, showed us more than ever before the importance of working people. And I'm talking about all working people in hospitals, in shops, and in my case, in different transport sections. Many of those workers, especially young and precarious workers, as has been mentioned already, work long hours for low income and bad or non-social protection. In the same time, those workers made possible for the world to keep going, to keep moving, the rest of the world to have some basic needs fulfilled, to have the food, to be healthy or stay healthy. So this is the importance of the working people. And in my case, mostly I talk about the seafarers and transport workers, but all workers have a special place in this pandemic. Now, these two challenges, climate crisis and COVID-19, must be two main elements that will allow working people to influence the future and the so-called new normal that will be the part of our future. Now, it is hard to know with certainty what will new normal look like, but the fear that it won't include basic human and workers' rights as well as people's environment is definitely present. As unions representatives, our main role is to make sure that government, as well as other stakeholders, especially employers, make sure that sustainable development pays special attention to workers' rights and livelihoods. In the same time, we need to push all those stakeholders to make sure that climate justice is also the center of the new normal. We need to connect those two challenges and make sure that our future is much better than it is today. So today is actually the opportunity we have to make sure that young workers, but also all other workers are protected. We need to make sure that the profit is not the only factor that will be taken into account when we adapt to new normal. We need to educate workers on their rights. We need to push employers that they make sure that workplaces are safe for both workers, but also for environment. GovS and the affiliated unions must work together. We must come together and influence international organizations, governments, employers to make sure that the workers as well as an environment are their priority. Now, I will conclude this introduction by saying that as unions and workers' representatives, we must make sure that the global solidarity is in the center of building new normal. In that case, the world that will be sustainable for future generations will be possible. Thank you.
Excelente, muchísimas gracias, Dorotea, por esta pequeña introducción.
Thank you. That was an excellent introduction, Dorotea. Very clear. Hello to you all. We're going to ask Ashna also to talk to us about her experiences, what is happening in the trade union movement in her region, and more specifically in her country, Mauritius. And she's going to talk about trends, new economic processes, the new environment, the pandemic, COVID-19, which has actually introduced a big transition. But there are other aspects which have impacted us. And I think it would be very useful to hear what has been done in her union, working together with young people, and also to work with migrant workers. Ashna, over to you.
Thanks, Debbie, for giving the chance to speak. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashna from Mauritius again, from CTSP, Confédération des travailleurs du secteur public et privé. a confederation for private and public workers, whether informal and formal sector, and even migrant workers. It's true that we have been affected by the COVID-19 recently, where several workers have lost their job or have got new terms and conditions of employment. However, I would like to just draw attention to a bit in the past. Like in 2008, we used to have a law which was like an anti-worker law, and our union leaders have struggled a lot, like for 10 years, struggled to have the amendment of a new labor law. On 24 October 2019, the TSP celebrated a new labor law amendment as an important win of the 10 years of sustained pressure on the government. The new law was a big step forwards in protecting workers in all industries, including migrant workers and precarious workers. But shortly after the law was passed, the COVID-19 pandemic forced the country into confinement. The labor law amendments will have been tremendous benefit to workers during the pandemic because we have been able to implement the PRGF, which is the Portable Retirement Gratuity Fund, where if a worker has been sacked from the job or has given his resignation, he's going to benefit from his years of service, which is really a nice thing for every worker in Mauritius. And soon after the pandemic, where the government has announced that he's going to bring some new amendments in the labor law, we had the employers from big industries who were trying to lobby to change this law, to remove this PRGF from our Workers' Rights Act 2019. But fortunately, our union leaders have been able to pressurize the government not to remove this law, but to amend the laws for the betterment of the workers. So during the pandemic, our union leaders have been able to negotiate for betterment of the workers, whether migrant workers or even informal workers or formal workers. We have been able to bring amendments such as increase of the transition employment benefit. For example, if a worker is going to be unemployed for a certain period of time, the worker was used to benefit from 90% of his basic wage for 3 months only. But our union leaders have been able to amend that clause and increase it from 90% for 6 months, which means if a worker is going to be unemployed for 1 year, the worker is going to benefit from 90% of his basic wage for 6 months and then 60% for the next 6 months. And also, we have been able to, during the pandemic, we have been able to help several migrant workers, as I have already informed you all before during my introduction, that we are a union confederation looking as well for migrant workers in Mauritius, because we have so many migrant workers in Mauritius who speak different languages like Bangladesh, Hindi, from Madagascar who speak French. So we have youth in our union, in our confederation, who can speak different languages. So we have been able during the lockdown period to help migrant workers who were not even benefiting from any kind of food or even wages. We still have cases in front of the Ministry of Labor where we are fighting for these migrant workers to have their dues as soon as possible, because we know that even all of us are migrant workers. It doesn't mean that if someone is from another country, he's a migrant workers. So during the pandemic, we have an increase in our membership, a drastic increase in our membership, because we have so many members who are coming, so many workers who are coming to the union to ask for help because they have either been terminated from the employment without any notice or without any compensation. And so we are helping them as far as we can. And thanks for the PRGF, these workers, even they're being sacked from their work, they are benefiting from the years of service. They're not losing the years of service, because in the previous legislation, if you are going to be terminated from your job, you are not going to benefit from your years of service. So the PRGF has been a blessing for workers. And that's all. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ashna, Nice y Dorotea por este primer acercamiento a los contenidos.
Thank you very much, Ashna. Now, we've been talking about the specificities and good practices which are being developed in the trade union movement. And we have been speaking about the transformation process that Nice was talking about, the gender aspect, and also working with young people and evolutionary trends. And we've been talking about the process of change, which is being introduced in the trade union movement. And Dorotea spoke about the importance of the current situation and the need to include just work, and that has to be a focus for sustainability, and that we need to do this for the workers, and also make it clear to employers about the need to talk about change in climate conditions in order to talk about sustainability. And we were talking with Ashna about the new normality and how you can achieve transformation processes, how you can take this forward, how you can make sure that they benefit workers, and how we can generate change processes. I think that this is important in terms of the impact that they may have, especially on migrant workers and people working in the informal sector. They must be able to be given real rights in the labor markets. And we need to talk about the socio-economic impact, and we've seen how many sectors are being impacted today. Now, we have spoken about the macro aspects up to now, and we've spoken about how we see things from a perspective of the trade unions. But I think that there are three questions which are associated with one another. And I think that we need to see how we can find solutions to these questions. We need to see what is the model of society, what is a country model we should be following, what we young people can visualize as we move towards the new normality. What is the new model of society which we need in order to achieve what we want for the future? And I think we can ask each of the three panelists what they think needs to be done, and how can we be part of that construction, how we can be part of this new model of society which we envisage, and how we can strengthen that model which we all want as we enter this new normality. And perhaps we can ask you, panelists, to answer within a minute or 2 minutes max, so that we can give opportunities to people participating in the webinar to ask questions. Can we ask you, Dorotea, to start, please?
Thank you, and thank you for your question. Now, as young workers, I believe it's crucial that we lead the change that will happen, and it will happen soon. So what we need to do, we need to make sure that we are the part of the processes of the changes that are happening. In my personal experience, or my personal example, we have the group in the ITF Sustainable Transport Working Group that works on developing the policy that will lead to change or to protect the climate, to do something from the union perspectives. And as a young transport workers representative, I am the part of this group. So we work really, really hard on having the new policy, and then the next step will be to implement this policy, to make key decision makers such as national governments, international bodies, and every other important stakeholders, especially employers or their organizations and federation, to hear what we need to achieve and to implement what we ask them to do. And what is the most important is that something must change in the world for us to protect our future, our planet at the end. But in this changing happening, we must ensure that workers, all workers, their basic rights are protected. And this is something that all unions should work more, because we can change something only if we work on these issues together. So young workers should and will, I really hope so, lead this change and make sure that everybody else understands what we are facing, because that is our today, but it will also be our future. Thank you.
compañera Ashna.
Sister Ashna?
Yeah, thank you. For us, for our union, we need to recruit more young workers. We need to build strong unions by recruiting more workers and make them understand that a trade union is an organization where we have no discrimination. Because in our union, we don't have discrimination between young workers and our leaders, our seniors. We say our mentors. It's good to understand that even if we are young workers, we do have the support of our mentors who are there to help us to know what is a trade union. Basically, we can see that age difference is a very big issue in several organizations. But as young workers, we need to remove that barrier because we know that our leaders are here as our mentors. And then it's very important for us to educate ourselves, to learn more about trade union. And this can happen with our leaders, our mentors in our organization. For example, if we learn more, if we educate more, we can become strong and have a stronger voice to advocate for change in front of the government. So it's better to learn and seek advice as far as possible and to recruit more workers, more friends in different organizations. Thank you.
Muy bien. La compañera
Very
Nice.
good. Can I ask you now, Sister Nice?
Yes, in what's happening around the world, especially, for example, in our country, that we have a very authoritarian government who really fails in delivering what the people really needs. I think it's very important as young people that we are not losing our vision despite of the current crisis that we are experiencing right now, because the vision, what we are dreaming of should keep us moving and getting things in our hands, meaning we are extending in building our power, not just within our union, but also outside of us, building coalition movements from different sectors against our fight. So getting involved means not just within our union, but what's happening outside our society. Like Sister Dorothea have said, we need to protect our environment because this is the place we are living. So we need to contribute in building workers' power that would require organizing and education work, because our movement can be effective if we, not only for our collective bargaining agreements, but for a bigger collective bargaining, and that is a power struggle between workers and the capitalists, between those in governments, and between us. So not losing our vision, getting involved, and contributing to building workers' power to have a better normal, we think is the key in transforming society, aside from making sure that our strategy can help us realize the vision that we want to live. Like for us, we are using social movement unionism.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Sister Nice. Thank you for those answers. Taking up this idea of new normality and how the trade union organizations need to play a bigger role and help construct a new form of work and integrate new content. Some already exist, but we need to strengthen them. And I wonder if I can share some experiences with you. It's about a subject of focus of rights in the trade union as an instrument of social justice. We are considered as being a defender of human rights. And in the Inter-Americas region within PSI and Public Services International, we've done a lot of work in order to integrate into the trade union work the defense of workers, particularly for LGBT+. I think that this is another sector of the population as we create new forms of normality, which has to do with trade unions which want to promote full trade union rights. And I think that during the pandemic, we have heard the role of Ashna talking about how certain vulnerable populations are affected, migrant workers in particular. And she was saying that you have to work for trade unions without there being any discrimination. And we have done a lot of interesting work in the Inter-Americas region, which has used the platform to reach out to young people, to reach out to the Association of Women. And we wanted to say that these aspects are an important aspect, not just a proletarian platform. And we also saying that we need to work with young people on climate change. And we need to bring in young people in order to fight for the rights of LGBT and against racism. In our trade unions, we have persons who haven't really spoken about these aspects, perhaps because they're conservative, in certain cases because they don't want to be able to or won't have to discuss what they consider to be polemical discussions. But from the trade union point of view with young people, we believe that we need to map out a position. We need to talk about the processes of discrimination and vulnerability which have marked our countries. For example, the right to have access to work for trans workers. And we have countries in Latin America where the rate of homicide against the LGBT community is very high. Brazil is a case in point. So a lot of work needs to be done to take up environmental issues, to work against informal work, to fight for the rights of women. And we need to talk about all human rights together in a more global, holistic perspective. And that means that we need to take on board the fight against all forms of racism and in favor of LGBT issues. I think that we're going to answer some of the questions which are coming to us through the chat box. And I'm going to ask Dorothea to ask or to answer some of the questions. Cedric in the chat saying, knowing the context where there is a lot of discussion about fundamental rights, and particularly the way the big employers have been applying them during COVID. What can we do to strengthen the trade union movement? Dorothea, can we speak to you about that?
Thank you. Yes. We are aware of lots of workers not having their basic rights in this moment. The best example I have is thousands of seafarers, hundreds of seafarers staying on board the ship and not being able to go home for a year or more. So what we as trade unions, we must talk to governments, we must talk to employers to find a way to help all workers in different fields to just have their basic rights. So everybody has the right to work, everybody has the right to stay healthy, and everybody has the right to come home. And this is something that we as unions can and must do. What we do in my union, for example, we talk to our government, to ministry, maritime ministry, all the time, on almost daily basis, to make sure that they do whatever the government can do to make sure that the seafarers are protected. And it should be same in every sector for every single worker. So the union's work is to make sure that we find the ways to help the workers, to listen to workers, but also to make sure that the workers are aware of all issues that can affect their future, their workplaces, and their lives. And this is the place where we come again to climate change, because it is already affecting all workers. It is affecting employers, but instead of making sure that they have sustainable workplaces and protected workers, they only, or most of them, are trying to just make sure that their profit is the same as it used to be. And this is something that we really need to talk more about and to make sure that this changes in future. Thank you.
Excelente, Dorotea.
Thank you. Ashna, could you come in now? And we've had a question from Pakistan, and I'd like to hear what you think about this. They're talking about COVID, and a lot of the formal jobs have now become informal jobs in a lot of countries around the world, and people are using this not only to cut certain spending, but also it means that the work that is being done in the informal sector has become even more casual, has become even more precarious. So there is this seepage from the formal to the informal sector. Now, given what is happening, Ashna, what would you see as the role of the unions here? What can we do, really, for people who are seeing that they're moving from decent work to work which would not count as decent? And basically, there seems to be a tacit agreement to the increase in informality. How do you react, Ashna?
Okay, so that's true. It's very difficult to go back to a normal way after the COVID-19 pandemic. However, with a strong consultation with the government, our union have been able to add a new thing in the law, as I have mentioned already previously when I was talking just a few seconds back. I told you guys that we have been able to amend some parts of our Workers' Rights Act, the new labor law, where we have been able to put a section on atypical worker. Maybe this word will sound new for some people here, but atypical worker is someone who is performing online work from home, online work, and they were never governed by any legislation. And during the pandemic, they were asked to work for several hours from home without any provision from the employer. So our confederation, our leaders have been able to negotiate with the government a special section on the Workers' Rights Act on atypical worker, which is kind of informal sector as well. We have been able to working hours, define their working hours, even their wage, and even the provisions for their materials, such as electronic materials, such as a laptop, etc., so that the employer knows they have a type of commitment despite their working from home. And also, right now, we are trying to implement, to ask the government to bring occupational safety and health COVID-19 back, where we are going to talk about ergonomic issues while working. For example, if I'm working at home, I will have ergonomic issues because if I don't have a proper chair, a proper atmosphere to work, definitely I'm going to have several health issues. So we are trying to bring a new occupational safety and health act based on COVID-19. And even we are trying to negotiate to put COVID-19 as an occupational disease because we can contract that at work, even at work. And for informal sector, we have a union which is affiliated with our confederation, whose name is Distributive Trades Employees Union. And the members are vendors who sell clothes in the market or stalls. Definitely, it's very difficult to organize informal workers in Mauritius, and I think it's everywhere because there are workers who are working on their own time or own conditions of work without even knowing they have a legislation for them. We have these workers who have been affiliated with us to ask for help for benefit from remuneration from the government. During the lockdown period, we have been able to ask the government to pay this informal sector, which we can name self-employed people or domestic workers, a wage. Okay, because during the COVID-19, everywhere was closed. Definitely, they have not been able to work. How will they will survive? So we have been able to ask the government to give them a basic wage salary so that they can survive the pandemic during the lockdown period. And also, we have been able to put in place a domestic workers regulation because We have the workers who are, we call them bonatouffeurs, who work in someone's home to clean their house, to wash dishes. They were previously unaware of their normal working hours. So our confederation have been able to pressurize the government in this law for the informal sector, for domestic workers, to know that they are governed by legislation as well. They are supposed to be paid overtime if they work beyond their normal working hours. They have a basic wage to obtain. They are protected by the government. They are also should also benefit from social protection, as we say, decent wage, decent salary, decent condition of work for everyone. So it's about the domestic workers that we have in Mauritius, and that's all. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Ashna.
Thank you, Ashna. Now, for NICE, looking at new normality that we've been talking about, we were looking at some of the challenges. Now, what about how women can be protected during this change? So, what conditions should be pursued by the trade unions here? What should they do to make sure that some of the labor rights would strengthen the position of women? Some change has taken place here, and these changes are affecting a lot of people. But how is this going to affect care work? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. For one, we are demanding for the ratification of ILO Convention 190 because it can pave way in reviewing our existing policies in the Philippines when it comes to women, especially to women workers, both for informal and formal. I must say that we have some good legislation in relation to women in terms of their protection, but ratifying ILO Convention 190 or the violence and harassment in the world of work will help us review some of the loose ends in the current policies. Second, like what Sister Ashna have said, because not just women, but also men and all the workers will also need to make sure that COVID-19 be recognized as an occupational disease. Many of the women are working in the care economy, and in the care economy, they are being paid less. They are working in a very hazardous environment, especially right now, our nurses, our domestic workers, but there's no guarantee that they can get hazard pay. For example, only those who have their unions can negotiate for hazard pay. Though in the national level, we are campaigning for it, we are lobbying for it, but it's not easy because now the government wants to focus in giving a subsidy, but unfortunately, it's not enough. That's why we are demanding for income guarantees, especially for those women who are single parents, especially those women who are being victimized. Because you know what, here in the Philippines, we have the longest general community quarantine, meaning we have the longest lockdown in the world, and many cases have been reported of violence against women, but no access for them to report. There's no access to justice. Many for them to go to the market, to go to the local community, there is just a sex for pass. So can you imagine how vulnerable women are? And we want to change these things, but it is not the work of the union alone, but it's also the task of the women's movement. That's why in the Philippines, we in Centro, together with the other labor centers, we are working in coalition with other bigger women's movement. We are in coalition with the World March of Women Filipinas, who have many sectoral organization. From there, we are learning from them how to address issues of violence, what are the key things that we are need to understand so that we can fight back and we can resist. So we currently right now, we are in the forefront of claiming our rights, and right now that we have a fear of the anti-terrorism act, women is also in the front lines with that. So I'm just answering also in broad terms so that people can also see that women is also in the front lines of bigger political fights, while we are also demanding for in addressing the situation of women workers. That's why we are demanding that there should be more public investment in public services, and there should be a study and an action to address the unequal pay for those who are in the care services, where women are mostly in that sector. So we want COVID-19 to be an occupational disease, and for us that can also help address the situation of women aside from the ratification of C-190.
Bueno, muchas gracias a las tres por
Thank you to the three of you. Thank you having fed into the discussion and also for reacting to the questions that have been asked in the chat. Could I just share with you from something from Ruth SNAT in Mexico? We heard from Mexico one of the experiences that they've had, and also along with what Dorotea said to us about working on climate change. They have used the educational system, or they forged alliances with the educational system to make children and young people aware of these issues and these challenges. And looking at the new normality and what we're talking about as we come out of C-19, we've also heard from South Africa. And looking at new ways of work in South Africa, they have been looking at the working from home. And in doing this home working in South Africa, brothers and sisters there have said that it is not so easy for young people to work from home. And even this could be seen a little bit self-centered, because young people being young can't really develop the contagion with the disease. It is they supposedly don't have the same health impact. So it might not be necessary there for them to go online rather than the population that has to be protected, because as they're young people, it seems that they are less likely to get infected, or that they would be classified as vulnerable. Now, I think also is something that we can discuss, and that is in a lot of countries, they're talking about different forms of work. And as this new form of work might have good sides to it, but there might also be bad things in that for the trade union movement. So looking at how we can keep workers organized. As with people work differently, how can we people actually be kept organized, because these new ways of working might be used to make work more flexible. And I think it was our sister Ashna who brought this up, and I think Nice as well, or maybe it was Dorotea, but when trying to develop sustainable jobs, how can we also look at the safety of the people doing the work? Because we're looking at sustainability here. And we're now looking at basically these new forms of work might be making people more vulnerable, We've seen this in public services, for example, where there are young women who are working and there are young men working who are on the front line. And they don't always have the right protective equipment. So in some countries, I think it is important that we look at the safety of workers. Now, Dorothea, there is a question in the chat, whether are you aware of any good practice within the unions or linked to the unions? And I think NICE brought this up. Are there any areas where women can work together for climate justice within the trade union movement? What spaces exist for women? Thank you.
So when we talk about climate change, women definitely have the specific place on this issue. This is a global issue that includes every single person in the world, not only workers, but every single person. What we need to do is we need to get together. We need to develop policies that will make sure that every aspect of the society, every single worker, especially women workers, are protected in the future that we will face, and that I believe we will face it quite soon. The thing what we want to achieve is at the end of the day, or in 2050, is the zero carbon in the world. And that won't be easy because of the different obstacles we have, as especially big corporations. But the women workers, young workers, and every other worker needs to understand the importance of this, needs to help or be the part of the unions and help the unions to push those issues and make sure that we are all, at the end, we don't let the big corporations to lead this change. Because if we do that, if we forget or we leave these questions out of our hands, then we will have big corporations, big companies, big employers lead this issue, and we will end up in the place that we don't want to be, because we might protect partially the climate, but we won't have the workers' rights protected. So this is the work for all of us, for young workers, for women, for every single worker in the world, to make sure that we come together and make sure that we are the part of this change. Thank you.
Hay una pregunta que está formulada para las
Now,
tres. Y le voy a
we also have a question, and perhaps you could answer this question, is just before we heard from Dorothea, we were talking about the return to normality, and we were talking about all the effects of the pandemic. And there is one phenomenon which we've seen, and this has been seen around the world, and this is a consequence of the pandemic. There has been a reduction of working hours, removal of work contracts, and in some of the sectors, and amongst the people most affected in some of the sectors has been young people. We've also seen pay cuts as well. And this, of course, has a socio-economic effect in countries. So the question is, what are we doing as the trade union movement? And what could we do for younger people, particularly those who are most affected by this, because it's the young who are bearing the brunt? What can we do to resist these policies that are being applied in some parts of the world? So what can we do to resist this? What can we do to try and stop this happening? How can we move to a new normality, but without allowing people to reduce trade union rights? Perhaps I could turn to NICE on that one. Could you take up that question?
Thank you, Brother Davey. For me and for our union, there's no shortcuts in making a change. Of course, we have fight and lobby the hard for our rights, especially our trade union rights and political rights, and we don't want that to be we don't want that to lose. We don't want to lose our rights, and to protect that, we always need to speak up as trade unions. But for our voices to be heard, we need to get our acts together, because in the Philippines, for example, we are from different labor centers, and the current problems cannot be addressed individually on an individual level, that a specific labor center address this issue on their own. We need to get our acts together to address the issue. But like what I've mentioned earlier, if the government would want to bail out, they should be bailing out workers, and it will be a good opportunity in building up the public health system that can create bigger opportunities and bigger jobs. So if you want to build a public health system, then it's now the right time that our government or the governments of other countries should create an industrial plan that can lead to building up the public services, where public services can generate jobs, so that the economy can recover, and can help generate purchasing power to the workers. But for the workers, for the trade unions, it is also our duty to get our workers be organized, and not just unionized in a form that they were able to register themselves, but act as a union. Just to add a while ago, I know we are many here in the Zoom room, so I am mentioning C-190 all over and all over again. So I just like to mention that Uruguay and Fiji were able to ratify it, and it's about violence and harassment in the world of work. And while we are in this kind of pandemic, it's not stopping us from lobbying and doing our tasks. Actually, here in the Philippines, we'll have our very first consultation in August, and we are about to start in doing the ratification process of our Philippine government, and we want the trade unions to be involved. And that means that by pushing that, we are not retracting our rights, but we need to make sure that our demands are being heard. And for that to be heard, we need to get our acts together, all unions. And that means unions should also be aware and alert on every little process, because the disadvantage of this pandemic is that the capitalists will always say that we are also affected by this, so we will not shoulder your testing, your swab test, so we can reduce your collective bargaining agreements because we do not have nothing. It's not the time in reducing our rights, but we need to make sure that we are still advancing it and protecting it, while we are lobbying hard on our end. But lobbying hard would require education and campaign work to our members and to our fellow workers.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, also for us, we are having many cases where workers are complaining to us that their workers, their employers are asking them to have a reduction in their working hours or reduction in their salary as well. So for us, it's not illegal to have reduction in salary and in working hours. If you are a worker who is already in the union, or a company who's recognized by the union, you are supposed to have negotiation with the union before amending any terms and conditions in the employment. So we, as union, whenever we are hearing that an employer, which know that we have members in the company, is trying to modify the terms and conditions of employment, our union leaders are going to send them a letter to ask them to consult with us first. We are supposed to have a consultation between both parties, the employer with the employees and the union, to have a consultation and to see a consent solution that both parties can agree. And in the law, in our Workers' Rights Act, we have a section based on compromise agreement, whereby if a worker and employee comes to a compromise agreement, that is, if they want to come for reduction of hours or salary hours for a certain period of time, they can do it through compromise agreement, but this have to be vetted by either a trade union member leader or a labor officer. And this is how we are educating our members to know that they have these rights in the Workers' Rights Act is through our YouTube channel, Facebook channel. And it will be also very important to note that during the lockdown period, we have made maximum use of our social media platform to educate the Mauritian people, even if they are not unionized to our union. We have been able to convince them, to educate them about the amendments we are having in our laws, because we were having so many amendments during the lockdown period on the law, and were bringing so many confusion among the workers. So education of members is very important, and creating awareness is very important as well. As we are moving in an industry 4.0, it is very important to make maximum use of 4.0, the technology. And I'm sure that many among us have used the Zoom platform, the webinar platform, so many times during the lockdown periods to have meeting. And we have been able to analyze that we need technology in order to educate our members during the pandemic. So our union is making the maximum use of the Zoom platform to have meetings, even with the government during the pandemic, and even with the members or employers, so that we can prevent the employees from the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. What about you, Sister Dorothea?
Thank you. So as my colleagues already said, and especially Ashna just mentioned, the education of our members is crucial in every moment, and especially in this COVID-19 crisis. What we faced in transport, and especially in my case in maritime or with the seafarers, is that the companies are using this COVID-19 pandemic to save money by not sending seafarers home after months and months on board. So what we are making sure that the seafarers know, or any other workers, is that they must be healthy and then must be physically and mentally fit to do their jobs. We are aware of different kinds of discrimination during this COVID-19 pandemic, because employers are finding their ways to make sure that they, again, earn more money, and the workers are those who are paying for this. And this is something we can't allow, and this is something we need to fight. We need to make sure that there are, for example, corridors for workers working in different countries to do their jobs, to perform their duties. We are aware of lots of people losing their jobs. We must make sure that national governments have the programs to make sure that those workers are also protected even if they lose their jobs. We as unions need to find a way to support our members in the cases they lose their jobs, they lose their health because of this pandemic and working conditions. So this is something that we all must make sure that is happening. So young workers especially are hit by this COVID crisis, because if you have young seafarers on board the ship, the company will say he or she, he's young, he can stay on board the ship, but he shouldn't do that because he's young. He must have some basic rights protected, and the unions must talk to companies, talk to employers, talk to governments to make sure that they are aware of the issues we have, and they are making basic rights being fulfilled for every single worker. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias nuevamente.
Thank you very much, Dorothea, for the answers to the questions that are coming into us all the time, and which we're addressing during this webinar. I think that we've got a load of different challenges, and many actions are being undertaken. And it's not just the trade union movement that is involved. I think that we need to understand that in many of these we need to work together with other social movements in order to be able to work through these different platforms and to talk about the public policies in the different countries. Because in many of these cases, and I think that one of the big challenges that we have in the trade union movement today is that we've got to go beyond just trade union issues to social issues. We've got to have a citizen-based trade union movement. So if we're going to talk about trade union agenda and talk about the right of women, just pay, gender equality for pay, etc., decent work, recognition of the right to labor rights, and the recognition of forms of work that should be remunerated, the fight against informal work, precarious work in the informal sector, including workers who work in the building sector or other activities, for example, in the agriculture sector. And I think that historically they have been vulnerable sectors and there are very few rights. And we've got to see how within the trade union agenda, the rights of migrant workers can be integrated. Or for example, how trade unionism can play a proactive role in the defense of the environment in favor of sustainability against climate change. I think it's a question of how we're going to work together with other movements. I think that we need to address them. And I think it's quite difficult for us to move in that direction because sometimes we've only been looking at the direct trade union rights, but not necessarily think of actually seeing how those rights affect the whole of society. I believe that if you look at some of the comments, I think that there is one person from Uganda who has been talking about how we can work towards a new form of working within the new normality, how informal workers can have access to these rights or formal rights. How can they take advantage of labor rights? And a lot of workers, as we know, have been completely flexibilized. And we also have to ask how the trade unions or how the union movement in the past, for example, in the Philippines, what has been done to safeguard employees' wages? And there is another question for all three of you. And we're going to try and tie them all together because I think that we need to see how we can deal with all these issues together. We're limited by time, of course. Stress. We have mentioned what are the trade unions going to do in order to have an impact on public policy making in the countries, something which is not just parochial, but something that needs to be done, which goes from a trade union agenda to a national agenda. How can we have an impact on public policy making? How can we make sure that governments listen to us, introduce transformations, and that we have a more affirmative policy? Sister Nice, can I start with you?
Yes, that's a very good question, and I definitely agree that the trade union should work on bigger and broader social movements because we have one vision, and that is to transform society with a just and equal and equitable kind of living. Having said that, as with our labor coalition, we are building our labor agenda together so that we have the same frame on what we are going to lobby in terms of wages, in terms of policies, and not forgetting our key demands of stopping contractualization or casualization of work, both in the public and private. Right now, our parliaments, both the lower and upper houses, are still conducting a series of committee hearings via online. So we need to get used to it. We need to train our leaders how to use that platform to maximize that opportunity to be to raise our concerns. We are also in the process of doing our work and campaign in relation to wealth tax, the progressive taxation, because right now there is a problem with our taxation that only the working people are paying more rather than big corporations and companies. So we want to campaign progressive taxation. In popular term, we call it tax more to the wealthy people, tax the rich more. So we are working on that, and side by side we are working with broader social movements in resisting the anti-terrorism act in the Philippines that will really endanger our trade union rights, our human rights. So we are working with different movements from what we have listed a while ago. And then thirdly, in relation to the movements, we should stop being sectarian. It is not about who are the best organization, but it's about getting our acts together because we have a bigger enemy. And that enemy is the principle of the current system, which is failing. That's capitalism, that is patriarchy, and we need to battle with that. And to do that, there's no shortcut. Like what I've mentioned, we need to continuously organize. And having said that, we need to make sure that our leaders, our members, are politically aware and politically conscious to the situation and how we are going to respond. When the pandemic started, we developed our key negotiation points in our different local unions, to their management, and our national demands as well, without forgetting that this is connected to our bigger vision and to our mission. I just like to flag, if this is the last part, then that on the 29th of October, there will be a global day of action for care. So I hope that everyone should be involved with that, because we are demanding, we are calling for a more investment to public services. And that will support our demand to public investment for our care economy as well. Thank you.
Compañera Ashna.
Thank you, Ashna.
Yeah, so I think it's true that we really need to work together with different social movements, because we are all responsible to change the world that we live in. And much work can be done if we unite together with different social movements. As I have already informed you guys before, that we in Mauritius, we have so many migrant workers here, and it's very difficult to work alone with so many migrant workers because they are from different countries. So as our confederation, we have been able to work together with different associations in Mauritius. For example, we work with the International Organization of Migrant Workers in Mauritius, which is an UN agency for migrant workers. And we're also working together with Catholic Church for workers from Madagascar. We are working together with the ILO, the BWI, and Industrial for migrant workers. So somewhere we can say that we really need to work together in unity so that we can bring social changes in the country. Alone, we are not going to do it, because if we are doing it together, we are going to have more energy, more power, more forces together. So it's better to work in collaboration with different unions or associations, and forget our differences or competition between each other, and work together for a new change in the country. Thank you. And also, I would like to add a little things for migrant workers. In Mauritius, we are doing like a awareness session for migrant workers, because as they were from another country and they came to Mauritius for work, and they are unaware of their own rights, where employers are like they're vulnerable for their employers, which they're being mistreated by the employers. So as our confederation, we are able to invite several migrant workers twice in a month on Sundays, and train these migrant workers on their rights in their own native languages. And they are being taught by the young workers in our union in different languages, because I have already told you guys before that we have young workers who speak different languages, Hindi, French, English, which can easily communicate with migrant workers. And I think that every union where we have many migrant workers must have at least this type of human resources who can easily communicate with migrant workers, because they are the most vulnerable people in a country. So I think it's very important to work together. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ashna. Compañera Dorotea.
Thank you, Dorothea.
Thank you. First of all, I would just like to point one thing out. You mentioned the question from Uganda and the organizing of informal workers. I would like to just point out that as the ITF Young Transport Workers Committee that I represent, we put as a part of our work plan, as our agenda, as an important part, the informal workers and the organization of the informal workers. And I'm happy to hear that you had a question from Uganda, because I was lucky enough to be in Uganda with our friends from Atiga Union, where there was quite a big event where they organized a big number of informal workers. And this is the good start. So unions must see what are the biggest problems their workers have and start organizing that. So we have really good practice and really good examples of organizing the informal workers, especially I'm aware of the example from Uganda. Another thing you were mentioning is the importance of the unions on national level. In my opinion, the importance of the union is huge in different fields they're working in. For example, working with seafarers, it is important that as a union we have a good relations with the ministry, or not good relations, but to work with them, to push them to have in mind seafarers or to have in mind workers, because they are deciding on laws and regulations. But in many cases, they have some other things on their mind. They forget about the people behind the scene. They forget about the workers. And our main work is to make sure that in every single step, every work they do, they have in mind that they need to protect workers. And this is important on the national level. It is also important on the international level. For example, Shanak mentioned the ILO, and this is a really good place to make sure that all workers are protected, that the international conventions are ratified, and then we do implement them in our national legislations. And that is another work that national unions have, to make sure that international legislation we have, different conventions in every different sector, are implemented in national legislation. And if they're not, if we see the gaps, the unions are here to point that out and to make sure that governments are implementing it in the right way and protect all their workers. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias a las tres.
Thank you very much to the three of you. Very, very quickly indeed, and just in 1 minute, could ask each of you to share a final thought with us. And I think the idea is to tell both unions and young people that we can make change and that we can open spaces and that we can make it clear that the trade union has to have more than a single agenda. So perhaps you could leave us, all of you, with a final thought. Nice, you have the floor.
Yes, amplifying voices of the young people is not about just being active within our own union, but also making sure that we are part of the whole process in transforming our society. Meaning, if climate change affects us, we care. If inequality affects us, we care. If injustice, racism, the capitalism, and even patriarchy affects us, we care. And it's not just an answer of how we are active in our union, but how we are active in making sure that the society is transforming. So we care in all arenas, in all places. And I believe young people are really not just the future leaders of today, of tomorrow, but of the day, because we care.
Muchas gracias. Nice.
Thank you. Nice. Ashna.
So for me, I'll repeat it again that we need to innovate. In order to have more youth, we need to find ways that the youth are keen to join the union. We need to move according to the time, according to the trend. Instead of using paper, several thousand of papers, long articles, better to make short videos where youth can easily listen what is a trade union. And it's true that capitalism is affecting our society, and we need to move. We need to have more youth to join the union, as youth is the future of the world. We always say that youth takes the lead, youth can move the world. So it's time for every youth to be unionized, or to at least help in the union, because you're the one who's going to bring the change. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Nice.
Thank you. Nice. Thank you, Ashna. Dorothea.
Thank you. I will be brief. I think these kinds of webinars and the number of people attended this webinar shows us that young people really care, that young people are aware of the issues we are facing, and they are more than happy to do something. And when we do that together, when we work together, when we share this global solidarity, I am 100% sure that we will have sustainable jobs, sustainable future for all workers, not only young workers, but for all workers. And I think this is the positive message from this webinar, but also I guess I have to say that we are all really lucky, because in my personal opinion, I'm surrounded with many young people, young trade unionists that are doing everything possible to make sure that the world will be better. And I think that we should continue doing that. And I'm really happy to be able to be part of that. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Dorothea, Ashna, and Nice for sharing your experiences with us, and also with sharing with us some of the way in which you are managing the change and the way in which you're showing leadership in the trade union movement. You have shown us that we face a whole raft of challenges at the moment. We face them as trade unions, and we face them as societies as we move to the new normality. And it's also up to us to shape that future as well. We have to put across our view of this. We have to put across the model of society that we wish to see in each of our countries. We're fighting for equality, and we're also fighting for societies that respect human rights and societies that fight against discrimination. We're in favor of tax justice as well. And we also want to work together to counter climate change. We want policies that put people at the very center. It is important that we do this for reasons of solidarity and support. And it's important that the role of young people, of women, of men within the trade union also means that we have to be able to come up with proposals and responses, not just the actual ideas that we get from society. We shouldn't just react to what we see. We also have to generate our own ideas. We have to be able to generate our own vision of what we want. Therefore, as has been said by Nice, I think very cogently, I think we have to push for ratification of Convention 190 against violence and harassment. And we have to fight again against the increase of the gaps that there are in society, economic gaps, pay gaps, and so on. And we have to work very much on an intergenerational approach. We all work together. We're all in this same process. And I think it's important that we forge links and alliances with other sectors. And these alliances are going to make us stronger. And these could even make us what we really are, which is a means to bring social change. Thank you very much indeed to all of you who've been with us this afternoon. There were a lot of questions, there's a lot of ideas, a lot of input, and a lot of interaction. So I hope that we can get down all that you've said. Certainly this will be fed into our onward thinking. And thank you very much to the sisters who are with us this afternoon on the panel, because you have shared with us this very good practice, and we can take that forward. Thank you very much. Good evening, good night, good morning, depending on where you are. The meeting is now adjourned.